In today's fashion shoot, I've got a hold of the brand new Profoto Soft Zoom Reflector 120. I'm going to show you how to set it up and how you can use a single modifier to create a variety of different qualities of light. Hey everybody, Lindsay Adler here. I am not ashamed to say that I am a bit of a gear nerd. I have a little bit of everything you can imagine, everything from a Fresnel to a Magnum reflector to, I don't know, 6 or 8 different beauty dishes. And so I got really excited when I had the opportunity to play around with Profoto's brand new modifier. This is the Profoto Soft Zoom Reflector, and it comes in 2 different sizes. We have the 120, which is what we're going to be using today, and the 180. Now the 120 is about 4.5 feet in diameter, and the 180 is 6 feet. Now what's special about this modifier and what I'm going to demonstrate to you is how it is built is it allows you to take a single modifier and change the light on a rod, adjusting the distance to change the quality of light. Now I do want to say up front for you fellow gear nerds out there that Profoto makes it very clear that this is not a parabolic. It's not a true parabolic, but the way it behaves is going to give us some similar features. All right, so what I want to do is I want to talk to you through a little bit of the setup and then show you it in action. So to begin with the soft zoom reflector, what's nice about it is even though it is quite large, it has pretty easy setup. It has these very durable tension rods that you can snap into place. So you don't need multiple people, you don't have to feed the rods in through anything, you're simply popping it up and snapping it into place. If you want to try this modifier, it works with the Profoto B series, D series, and Pro head. So what that means is if you have a B1 or a B10 Plus, that's the B series. If you have a D1 or D2, or the Pro heads, which go with the Pro packs. And so my recommendation is if you want to get the most out of this modifier, especially if you're trying to achieve really soft light, you want one of your strobes that has a dome in the front. When you're using a dome, it uses up more of the modifier because it's kicking the light in all directions. Now the flat heads can still work, for example, any of the B series, but that is a consideration if you want the most out of this modifier. Today, I'm going to be using a Pro head along with a Pro 11 pack. All right, so let's set up this modifier. The first step is that you need to put together the modifier, which only involves pulling on these very durable tension rods. You pull them up and you snap them into place all the way around the modifier. Once you've set up the modifier, then you're going to add the rod, and this is going to be key to achieve the versatile lighting effect that I'm going to show you later. The rod simply fits into the modifier itself. Now, by the way, if you want this modifier just to act like a deep softbox, a deep octabox, you can do so by adding the head directly into the back of the modifier without the rod. Then you could add diffusion or a grid, and this is going to make it very much the quality of light that you would get from a softbox of that size. That being said, the special element, what makes the magic of this modifier, is the rod. Once you have the rod in place, at the end of the rod, there's an attachment that allows you to mount the modifier to a light stand. The next step of setting up this modifier is adding what they call the light cage. You're going to attach this to the opposite end of the rod. This is the part that's in the modifier, and it simply screws in place. This is where you're going to attach your light. So here I'm adding the Profoto Pro head. And you'll notice that this, of course, has a cable. The cable can then feed through an opening at the bottom of the modifier. Now, one of the reasons that it's important to have the cable be able to go through the bottom of the modifier is that if the cable is just hanging out the end, you will not be able to attach diffusion or a grid. Now, these are 2 accessories that you can buy additionally. Now, adding a diffusion, there's both an inner and outer diffusion, will move it in the direction of giving you even softer light. The grid that can fit on the end of that modifier will allow you to control the spill and spread of the light. So now let's talk about how you're going to modify the quality of light. When your strobe, when your light is further inside the modifier, it gives you a harder quality of light. And that's because as you move it in closer, it's actually illuminating less of the modifier. It's giving you a smaller light source, a more specular light source. However, when you pull it further back out, you'll see the light spread out, fill more of the modifier, and that will give you a softer quality of light. So really close in, really deep inside that modifier will be hard and specular, and then further out is softer, and then of course, everywhere in between. When you look at the rod, you'll see several numbers. This is a great way for you to remember if there's a certain positioning of that rod that gives you a quality of light that you prefer. Now, of course, if you want the light to be even harder, you can move your modifier further away. That's one of the rules of light. And if you want that light to be even softer, you can go ahead and add a diffuser. So your question may be, what is the difference in this modifier to something I already own, especially if it's not a true parabolic? Well, the difference is it's a single modifier that allows you to change the quality of light. So for example, if I want soft light head to toe, I might grab a 5-foot octa or a large umbrella with diffusion. But if I want to change this quality of light and make it a little bit more specular, there's not quite as much that I can do to it. For an umbrella, you could take off the diffuser, for example. But with this modifier, I change the position of the rod and I can still get head to toe coverage, head to toe illumination on my subject, but I change the specularity and the contrast on the shadow edges. So far, everything I've talked about has been building the modifier and hypothetically how it works, but now let's go see it in action. So I'm going to bring my beautiful model on set and we're going to adjust the position of that rod to change the quality of light. For our first image, we are going to create the light in its almost softest position. So looking inside the modifier, the rod is going to be at the position of 5. This means that it is almost outside of the modifier. That is going to kick the light all the way around the soft zoom reflector, and that's going to give a softer, less specular quality of light to the face. I'm going to take a full length shot, and in that full length shot, pay attention to the tonality of the background, the quality and edges of the shadow on the ground. Then in the closer shot, pay attention to the details and the edges of the shadow on the nose and jawline. Taking a look at the far image, you'll see that the shadow on the ground is relatively soft, somewhat of a gradual transition. And then when we look at the close-up shot, look at the specularity of the skin and the transition of the shadow on the jawline. It's pretty gradual, but I wouldn't say it's extremely soft. So what would make it softer? Well, first of all, you could take that modifier and bring it closer to the subject. The closer it gets, the softer it will get. Furthermore, that's where you could add your diffusion, making it an even softer light source. So this is pretty soft, but you could make it even softer. This is at a position of 5. Now what we're going to do is move the rod to a position of 1, which means the strobe head is going to go even more inside, almost to the very back of that modifier. That's going to give us a harder quality of light. Before we talk about quality of light, I've only taken one image, and that's to show you just how overexposed this is. I kept my camera settings the exact same, but by moving the position of the rod, taking that strobe head and moving it inside the modifier, it actually makes it much, much brighter. And so this is one of the things you have to consider, is that as you're moving the strobe in and out of this modifier, your exposure is going to change. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to either turn down the power on the pack or I'm going to adjust my camera settings. So I think because I have the flexibility, I'm going to actually turn down the strobe power. And then one more and turn straight to me. Great. Let's begin by looking at the full length shot. We're going to study the shadow on the floor, and here you can see that it is quite defined. So if we compare this to the image with the first position of the light, you'll notice that the original position, the shadow is much more gradual, and here it's much more defined, which means by moving that light in for this image, the quality of light is much harder. But now let's pop in and look at the close-up shot. In the close-up image, you'll notice that there's a lot more contrast. The highlights are brighter, the shadows are darker and more defined. Also, the background is a little bit darker, and the image is more specular. These are all qualities that you're going to get with a harder light, and because the light is closer inside that modifier, it is a smaller light source. That makes it harder, but the way that the light is shaped, it's also creating the appearance of more of a fall off of light. That's why the background is appearing darker. In these two examples, I've selected the extremes of light, but of course you don't have to pick just very, very soft light or just hard light. You can pick somewhere in between, and that's the beauty of this modifier. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to vary the position of the light. I'll try some really soft, some really hard, somewhere in between, and that's the whole point. That is the benefit of this modifier, is it gives you the variability. And what I'm looking for is whatever I think looks best with this outfit. And of course, it's going to change from shoot to shoot. All right, so let's go get the shot. all of these images, I have beautiful, even illumination from head to toe, which becomes very valuable to me as a fashion photographer, whether I'm doing a fashion editorial or I'm photographing a lookbook where the lighting on the clothing becomes essential. The shots here also were shot with the Canon R5 and the Canon RF 24-105, which is what allowed me the variability in my crops and being able to do so very, very quickly. The Profoto Soft Zoom Reflector comes in 2 different sizes, and this is the smaller modifier. So if you want something even larger, to light an even larger area across your scene, perhaps a large cyc wall, then perhaps the Profoto Soft Zoom 180 is going to be the right fit for you. But here, the 120, I think, is still giving me gorgeous light for full-length fashion shots. If you want to see the gear used in the making of these images, be sure to check out the links in the description below, and of course, visit Adorama.com. And I highly recommend that you like and subscribe because I have many more videos just like this one coming your way. See you next time, everybody.